Are we facing the most dominant comeback of a team in modern F1 history? Or has Mercedes simply cheated legally again? These are the 5 things you need to know about the new Mercedes W17 and why it sounds so scary for the competition. Mercedes hasn't just built a new car. He has built a statement of technical and strategic power that could define the 2026 season before it even officially starts. It all starts with an almost invisible but decisive detail: the engine. What seems like simple compliance with the regulations is, in reality, an engineering masterstroke that borders on legal genius. The 2026 engine regulations impose a maximum compression ratio of 16:1, a drastic reduction compared to the 18:1 previously used. This standard seeks to limit the gross power of the internal combustion engine to balance it with the electrical part of the propellant, promoting a 50-50 distribution of thermal and electrical energy. However, Mercedes found a loophole in the technical wording of that regulation. The regulations in Article C.5.4.3 indicate that the ratio must be measured with the engine off and at room temperature. That seemingly trivial condition changes everything. Mercedes engineers designed engine components using metal alloys with a specifically calculated coefficient of thermal expansion. These materials, when heated during normal engine operation on the track, expand certain internal chambers in a controlled manner. What does this mean? Although the engine clocks a perfectly legal 16:1 when cold, when it reaches 120 degrees Celsius in full operation, the true effective ratio shoots up to 18:1. That subtle difference on paper translates into a brutal increase in performance on the track. In practical terms, this dynamic ratio delivers between 10 and 15 extra horsepower per lap. And this is not just a matter of top speed. By raising the engine's thermal efficiency, Mercedes can generate more power for every drop of fuel, vital in an era where energy management and sustainability are key. That is, it consumes the same but yields much more. This efficiency also reduces the internal temperature of the engine, extending the life of the components. Power and reliability in the same play. The most disturbing thing is that this development is not improvised. Sources close to the paddock indicate that Mercedes has been working on this idea for more than 2 years, since the initial phases of the engine design for 2026. That is, while other teams were still trying to adapt to the new regulations, Mercedes was already thinking about how to break it without breaking it. When the FIA checked the Mercedes engine during the homologation process, everything seemed to be in order, because it was, according to the measurement conditions established by the regulations themselves. Only when other teams began to notice the W17's unusual efficiency and speed were alarm bells raised. But by then it was too late. The power units were homologated, and the deadlines to redesign them are impossible to meet before 2027. What Mercedes did was play with the rules, understand them better than anyone else, and build their car around that superior understanding. These types of movements are what have historically defined the great dominators of Formula One. It is what Mercedes did in 2014 with its split hybrid turbo engine. This is what Braun GP did in 2009 with the double diffuser. It's not about breaking the rules. It's about reading between the lines, innovating where others only comply. And this time, Mercedes has not only won the development race. He has built an invisible advantage that his rivals won't even be able to match for another year. An advantage hidden in plain sight. And legal. But how will the other teams react? Will they try to pressure the FIA to change the rules midway, or will they accept their fate for this season? What is certain is that this play is not a simple technical detail. It is the first move in a much larger war that is about to break out. While the paddock was filled with amazement at the performance of the new W17, something began to simmer silently in the garages of its rivals. Frustration, disbelief, and anger. What Mercedes had done was legal, yes, but it also felt deeply unfair. The first to raise their voices were Ferrari and Honda. Both teams, with engine projects worked out to the millimeter and hundreds of millions invested in development, began to notice an inexplicable performance difference in comparative simulations and cross-telemetry data. It wasn't just that Mercedes was ahead, it was the way it was ahead. Not even Red Bull, with its recent championship experience, could hide its discomfort. The problem was not only technical but structural. Because by the time they understood the legal trick of the dynamic compression ratio, it was already too late. The power units for the 2026 season are subject to a strict homologation regime. Any deep modification to its internal components, such as those necessary to implement Mercedes' thermal expansion system, not only requires months of design and testing, but is completely prohibited during the season, except for reliability reasons. That meant that Mercedes, and to a lesser extent Red Bull, which had been able to replicate part of the concept after hiring a former Brixworth engineer, had in their hands a structural advantage that was impossible to counteract. A difference that could not be eliminated with a simple software update, a new engine map, or an aerodynamic improvement. It was a question of physics, and that, in Formula One, is a definitive sentence. The reaction was immediate. Within days, the legal and technical departments of Ferrari, Honda, and Audi coordinated to request an intervention from the FIA. The accusation was not of cheating, but of regulatory abuse. They asked that the technical article that allowed this ambiguity be rewritten, or at least that the measurement conditions be modified, that the ratio be evaluated at operating temperature and not cold. But the damage was already done. On January 22, 2026, the FIA organized an emergency meeting with all manufacturers. And what was decided there changed the course of the championship. The FIA officially confirmed that Mercedes' interpretation was valid, that the measurement method specified in the regulation was clear, and that retroactive action could not be taken against a technical solution that had been approved during homologation. Legal, yes. Fair. That's another story. The decision generated a silent fracture within the paddock. Not only because of what it represented for the current season, but because of the precedent it set. Rival teams accused the FIA of implicitly favoring Mercedes, and some even spoke of a double standard, recalling how solutions such as DES or blown diffusers were banned after a season of dominance. But this time there was a critical difference. Mercedes' development was not a visible external system. It was not a device that could simply be banned. It was incorporated into the very essence of the engine, in the materials, in the alloys, in the thermodynamic design of the combustion chambers, and that made eradicating it almost impossible without rewriting the entire technical framework of modern F1. Even within Red Bull there were divisions. Although they also applied a reduced version of the system, Helmut Marko and Christian Horner knew that its development was incomplete. His newly arrived engineer from Mercedes had brought some of the knowledge, but not the complete plans. Its engine could come close in certain conditions, but it didn't match the efficiency of the Mercedes. And that, in a season with so many budget restrictions, was devastating. What Mercedes had done, in essence, was drop a legal bomb within the regulations. And although the rest of the paddock had their hands tied, they were not going to stay silent. The protests would continue. The pressure on the FIA would increase. And most likely, relations between teams already tense would enter a phase of open Cold War. But there is a nuance. McLaren, as a customer, does not have full access to the same level of integration as the factory team. Mercedes continues to optimize its chassis specifically for every engine pulse, every power curve, every cooling micro-adjustment. McLaren, on the other hand, must adapt its design from received specifications, and that creates subtle technical limitations. In other words, they have the same heart but not the same nervous system. And in Formula One, that makes the difference between pole position and third row. The presentation of the W17 was not just a technical launch. It was an answer loaded with memory. To the criticism, to the mockery, to the headlines that spoke of a finished team of a dead cycle. What we saw at Silverstone on January 22, 2026 was a show of strength, a reminder, a warning. This project was not designed solely to win. It was designed to destroy, to dominate not by small margins but by forcefulness. Mercedes does not want to return to the top by decimals. You want all the other teams to see the timer, review their data, and realize they have no answers. Let each simulation tell you the same uncomfortable truth. The W17 plays in another league. And the message goes beyond the paddock. It's for the sponsors who hesitated, for the media who buried the team too soon, for rival drivers who thought Mercedes was tamed, and yes, also for the fans themselves who began to forget what it was like to see Mercedes leading with authority. But there is another hidden message even colder. This domain will not be shared. Mercedes has not built this car to open alliances or promote balance. He doesn't look for packs. The W17 was designed with one goal in mind: to win without apology. When even if it means the season is decided in a few races. When knowing that the rest will barely have time to react. It's a comeback, yes, but not a kind return. It is a vengeful return. Methodical, unappealable. And if you think about it, it makes sense. Formula One does not reward those who simply participate. Reward those who dominate. To those who understand the regulations better than the judges. To those who take risks, innovate, and anticipate the future. Mercedes has recovered that philosophy. And now the rest of the world has to catch up. What lies ahead is not just a battle on the track. It is a redefinition of the hierarchical order. If Mercedes manages to maintain this advantage, it may force the FIA to change the rules once again. It may force rivals to spend millions on desperate redesigns. It can even cause a technical exodus towards its structure, as happened in previous years when everyone wanted to work with the best. Leave me in the comments what you thought of all this.